We're doing a special episode for the Ultimate Warrior. It's the 35th anniversary of his win on April 1st of 1990. We're going to be going over his top 10 moments, which is a combination of matches and promos, things of that nature. Today we got a special guest, Raz, who's a huge Ultimate Warrior fan. He's going to be joining us on the show. He's a big contributor. There we go. There we
For
go.
life, man.
Big contributor to the group. And take it away, Frank.
All right. Well, first, before we hit the top 10, Raz, you had an honorable mention you wanted to bring into this before we got into it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to bring in the fact of the Warrior slamming Andre the Giant. I know that there are two on YouTube that you can see, one from Canada, I believe, and one was from the Garden. Yeah. And my friend Phil, who I went to high school with, who's in the group, he saw that live. And I remember being so jealous, like, dude, you saw Warrior slam Andre? But back in, 1990, 1989, whatever, you couldn't get that on video. That just didn't exist. There was no internet. So I had to sit here all these years and finally, 10, 12, whatever years ago it was, I finally saw it. I'm like, finally. So I just thought that was a really cool moment because I know that is a very big stepping stone. At least back in that day, that was a very big stepping stone. If Andre let you slam him, you were kind of set up to be like the next guy. And it was just another stepping stone for him to become champion.
Definitely.
Yeah. That I actually didn't see until years ago too. I saw it on YouTube. I always thought about it as a kid. Can he do it? I have to assume that maybe I'm gonna say Vince, but I'll just blame Hogan anyway.
Of course,
we didn't get to see that when they fought on Saturday night's main event. We didn't get to see Warrior slam him.
Nope.
And he could have, but maybe they were just saving that just as a special thing that Hogan did. Who knows? But to see it years later was awesome. That was cool, and that was actually a really good feud. I wish we had more pay-per-views back then, and we could have saw a full-blown feud instead of just the house show stuff that I didn't see until years later.
Absolutely.
Andre by that point, even though his career was winding down and was coming to an end, and he couldn't really do a whole lot, to have Warrior be able to do that to him, like you said, was a huge honor. The one thing I didn't like was another match. He squashed him like so bad. Yeah. And to look at Andre like 2 years earlier, you're main eventing WrestleMania, and now you lost a 15-second match. It was hard to see, but he did it for the right guy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So that kind of made up for it. But the slam, it was so impressive.
It looked like he didn't. Yeah. It looked like Andre didn't help him. I don't know if it's just me.
No, it looked like a deadlift, especially the Canada one. Like the one in the Garden, it's like more of a scoop kind of Hogan.
Yeah.
Whereas in Canada, he picks him and you see him like almost struggling, and then he just throws him down.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It doesn't look like he helped him, and of course Heenan and Hogan all say Andre didn't want him to do it, but who knows? Who knows? That's
Well, if Andre didn't want him to do it, he wouldn't have done it.
Exactly.
That's true.
So, all right, let's go ahead and kick off the list. Number 10 on that list, the Warriors promo from Monday Night Raw on April 8th, 1996 against Goldust. I love this one. Yeah. Oh my, this is the first time you really see like a true person, a true warrior, and especially when he says, I got a full-length feature for you, me kicking your ass from beginning to end. I loved it. This was one of the best promos he did on a guy like, for Goldust.
Yeah, it was great because that was his, first time he talked to the fans in years, and we saw an edge that the Warrior had, and just him talking to the fans and telling us like, you spoke to me, all of you spoke to me. It was just tremendous. I don't know, Raz, what do you think about that moment, listening to him, having him speak again?
I actually went and rewatched this a couple days ago because obviously it's been so many years, and that is not one of the ones that is the standout, like the Hogan things that happened, or even 98 Hogan and Warrior. But obviously I saw it back in the day, but rewatching it and just watching him go from the maniacal Warrior, crazy, the voices you spoke to me, to all of a sudden freak. And then he's, yelling at him. And then I'm like, dude, this is like this. I wish I saw it back then in the same way that this is kind of the beginnings of what would have been an Attitude Era Warrior, in my opinion. That's Absolutely. How I feel. Yep. He could have been with them during that Attitude period if a bunch of other things didn't occur, because he started to become almost more human, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely.
It was more down to earth than the stuff we had to decipher back in 1989, 1990. You had to listen to the codes and stuff and watch the promos over a few times.
But it showed that he could evolve.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And listen, man, as a kid, I loved all the crazy stuff, but it was just cool to see. I was in college at that time. It was just cool to see, like, all right, he's progressing, he's changing. WWF at the time is changing. that's cool. He's adapting. He's not just coming out colorful and he's going to just babble and run off. That wouldn't have worked. So he was adjusting and adapting,
Right.
which I loved.
Absolutely.
All right, at number 9, and I love this one. The Warriors Survivor Series team in 1990.
Oh,
Probably one of the greatest
the
teams
greatest.
assembled of all
Let's just
time.
say the greatest.
The greatest of all time.
Yeah.
You had the WWF champion, Ultimate Warrior. You had the Intercontinental champion, technically, Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, and then you had the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors.
All the Warriors, because
all the Warriors.
Kerry Von Erich was the modern day Warrior, I believe.
Modern day Warrior, yeah.
Back in the days.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan. Perfect and Demolition just didn't know what they were up against that night. I mean, this was one of the greatest teams assembled. Unfortunately, probably time restraints is the reason why we had the eliminations the way they were. Axe was just not himself. He had dealing with his issues. You could tell when he was coming to the ring that it just wasn't the usual Axe. So pretty much smash and crush at this time. But when it came down to Warrior and Perfect, it was just amazing. And with him winning that match and going on to the match of survival was just amazing. Right. And the best thing is it kicked off the night too, so the fans were hyped going through the rest of the card.
They started off the night hot. I mean, you had a squad of killers, man, superheroes, man. Like it was tremendous to see those guys. As a kid, man, it was just amazing. I don't even know how to explain it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, at that time, they were superheroes, and even, at that age that I was and watching that, it was just like, it got me pumped for the rest of the card. And I'm like, yes, we're going to see Warrior again. This is great. Yep. Of course, we know who had to, of course, share the spotlight, but that's another story. Yeah. And it was awesome. I really thought that this is in my opinion, best Survivor Series team ever.
Oh, hands down. And then, like you said, the Survivor match later on, seeing the Warrior come back out there, him teaming up with Hogan, because at the time we don't know how Hogan really is politically. Not. So just to see Hogan and him again together, teaming up, that was awesome. And you throw Tito Santana into the mix.
Yeah, I like that they put him in there. At least give him the spotlight besides Hogan and Warrior.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, it was cool to have like that third person in there. He didn't make it to the end with them, but that's okay. Right. He got a little FaceTime. He got a one elimination in it. And then, as for me as a 14-year-old, then it was like, all right, it's cool that Hogan and Warrior together. I was a much bigger Warrior fan, but it was cool. Of course, hindsight, I'll leave it at that.
Right. And just the Warrior, I just felt like at that point, like that was, you could say the peak was beating Hogan, but as far as like a champion, I felt like that was the peak because you saw him just at that moment. I not that I didn't believe in him as the champion before that, but like I was like, this is the guy. Like now, this is the guy.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Unfortunately, that didn't work for somebody, brother.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So, all right, at number 8, the Ultimate Warrior's Hall of Fame speech, followed by this one hurt me, and I know it hurt you guys. The final Raw speech the night after. For me, the final night, the Monday Night Raw, kind of to me overshadows. Like I try to remember the Hall of Fame speech, but I just keep going back to that Monday Night Raw. When I see him come out, he's completely red-faced. He looks like he's gasping for air. I knew something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when it almost like he was saying goodbye that night. Like he knew something was wrong. And when he said every warrior breathes their final breath, I'm like, where's this going? And I mean, the fans were on every word he said. No, there was silence during his speech. But then to find out the next day what happened, it's just like, you got to be shitting me. Like, there's no way.
Yeah, I took it really hard. Like when it happened, when I was just stunned. I was just so happy to see him again. I had met him a year prior. Well, not really met him. I was in the same room. I went to a place in Jersey where he was doing signings and a speech, and so I was there. Like I was just feet away from him, which was really, and I'm glad that I went, because I didn't know he was going to pass away shortly after that. But he finally got his due. He finally came back home. He went into the hall. He got recognized after they bashed him with that stupid DVD, which was a disgrace,
Bullshit.
Which was ridiculous. But I felt like he must have known. Like he must have known that he was going to pass away by the words that he said and the timing of it. Like for him to be able to come back, it's almost like his spirit, his body, like just held on just long enough for him to come back, get in the hall, speak to the fans, and that's
Because
it.
it was hours later too. It wasn't like
It
it
Yeah.
was the
wasn't even
next day.
24 hours.
It
Right, it
was a
wasn't even
few hours
24
after
hours
Raw.
later, yeah. However
Yeah,
much.
I mean, I remember, watching it that night and then coming upstairs and telling my wife, I was like, something was up with the Warrior tonight. And she's like, oh, but you're so happy he's back. I'm like, yeah, I'm happy he's back, but something was wrong. And I this is going to date me a little bit. I recorded it. I have it on VCR tape. I recorded it on a VHS. And I'm like, all right, I went to work the next day and a coworker of mine who's a big wrestling fan said, Raz, you heard the Warrior died. I'm like, I know that old rumor. He's like, no, he really died. And 10 minutes later, my wife calls me on the phone and one of her students said, yeah, the Ultimate Warrior died. And she immediately checked on me because she knew, I was like so out of it that day, work and teaching. And, some of my students who were wrestling fans were all talking about it in class. And it was tough. And that was why then 2 years later, she bought me for my birthday, the Warrior tattoo, because I had always wanted to get one. And then she's like, now that this happened, you got to do it. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
just had to get up the nerve to do it. And I said, yeah, let's do it. But that was tough, man. That was a really, for somebody that I idolized growing up, and was just, thought he was like the coolest wrestler. And then like you said, it's like he finally got his redemption.
Yep.
And there had to be something, whether it was conscious or subconscious. He knew something was up because you could tell he looked frail.
Yeah.
He was shaking the ropes. He was having a hard time. He was struggling,
Yeah.
and you knew something was off. But I didn't know he was going to die the next day. That was
Right.
tough, man.
And then you go back to the night of all, behind the scenes they show you at of WrestleMania, and he's also making amends as well. Goes and talks to Hogan,
Yeah.
talks to Jake Roberts. That
Yep.
whatever you want. I'm not getting into it with him. Him and his BS.
Yeah.
I'm gonna knock him out.
Yeah,
okay, pal.
He
Yeah,
wasn't doing anything.
but Warrior, went up to him and said, "Hey, I'm sorry about everything that happened back then. We could have done great things." And Jake's like, "What?" But that's also like that's unorthodox of the Warrior as well.
Yeah.
Normally they would go to him, not the other way around. So
Hogan did chase him down, though. I think the story goes that Hogan did chase him down.
Yeah, does that come from Hogan?
I've seen the footage, like, and Warrior was just standing. I want to give Hogan the benefit of the doubt. He did it out of he really was sincere, but there's people that say that Hogan basically tracked him down to do it for the cameras to make himself look better by
What does that
apologizing.
mean?
Right, yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Either way, but it was good to see. It was good to see the two of them.
When the
Of
fans
course.
at the Hall of Fame chanted one more match, he should have brought Hogan back in the ring.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
But all right, moving on. Number 7 on the list, Warriors WCW debut, August 17th, 1998. Oh,
I loved
my
it.
God.
I loved it. Don't care what anybody says.
Dude, me too. I second that.
The return was phenomenal how they did it.
It was awesome.
What they did after the fact was crap, but his return into WCW in 1998 was great.
Yeah, Hogan said something about I've beaten everybody. I've beaten the Warriors or something. I remember he mentions the Warriors.
The Warriors of the something, he said.
Right.
All the Warriors in the business.
Right.
Or something to that effect.
Warrior came out. He cut that promo on him, talking about, "Oh, this is your barber, right? So this looks like your barber or something like that." To the disciple. He goes off on Eric Bischoff, and when he told Hogan, I get chills when he told Hogan. He says, "You may have beaten legends, giants, or whatever, great men." And he says, "But you never, ever beat a Warrior." I was just going crazy, man. It was incredible.
I remember.
It was awesome. Yeah.
I remember that summer, and I would go to a buddy of mine's house. We were watching all the Raws and Nitros, flipping back and forth like all of us were at that time. And I remember seeing the week before this, they showed some kids in the front row of Nitro, and they had like Warrior masks or paint on, and they were holding a sign. And there was like little drips and drabs of mentions of something happening. And I remember saying, like, he's coming back, and everyone's like, "No, you remember the Renegade?" I'm like, I don't know, man. I think this is different. I mean, they have his actual face paint. He's got to be coming back this. And then he did. And I loved it. And of course, they all bash it now. Oh, he spoke too long and this and that. Well, then why didn't you give him a time? Tell him he's got 5 minutes, and then you cut him off. Whatever.
Right.
They let it go. They let him ramble. I loved it. I was
great.
like, everything he's saying is correct.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
No. It was tremendous. See, I kind of knew Warrior was on the way because I was online. I was reading they weren't called dirt sheets online at that point. I guess it was just like wrestling rumors.
Yeah.
I guess. And I knew that he was in negotiations. The rumor back then, I don't know if you guys remember this, was that he was going to fight Goldberg, and he was going to be the one to end the streak. This was a major rumor. So I knew he was on his way, but I just didn't know when. And to see him, we hadn't seen him in 2 years. We hadn't seen
Yeah.
him since '96, since he walked out on WWF. But I thought the promo was tremendous. Okay, maybe it went on a couple minutes too long. So what? We loved it.
Who
Yeah.
didn't do a long promo in WCW back then?
Yeah.
No.
Then all that BS with Hogan after that. He's like, oh, he was gonna knock him out, and why did he went that Warrior went into business for himself. He says, oh, remember this on that DVD that Hogan said, well, you did the biggest no in the business. You told everybody that you beat me, so why would anybody want to buy a ticket? As if us as wrestling fans didn't know about WrestleMania 6.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, it's like we all knew.
Yeah.
We were all, unless you were 5 and you didn't see it.
Yeah.
You knew Warrior beat him. That was a whole big thing why they brought him back.
Right. Yeah.
Because Hogan wanted to put himself over.
I need to get that made him look so bad.
Yeah. Well, like
that was the one thing I remember Hogan admitting, saying like he himself screwed that matchup because of the fireball.
Oh yeah, that's right. And Warrior, when I saw Warrior when he gave that speech, he said that he basically felt like Hogan brought him in just to job him, like just for Hogan to get his win back.
I believe it.
Yeah, I do believe it. And Warrior said, you know what? It's all right. I took their money because he got paid a astronomical amount of money for a very, very small amount of time. So,
yeah.
You know.
And not only that, I read not too long ago that after squashing the Warrior like they did, Bischoff goes to Hogan and says, "Who's next?" And they tried to bring Yokozuna in so that he could do the same thing to him, but they couldn't because of his health. They couldn't do it. He wants to squash everybody that squashed him.
We could go on.
I know we could go on forever. But this ain't his episode.
Right. Exactly.
All right, let's move on. Oh man, yeah, you would put this one in there. This is a shot at me. Number 6. Ultimate Warrior's return at WrestleMania 12, squashing Hunter Hearst Helmsley. I loved it. I don't care. I'm a huge Helmsley fan, but you know what? That night, it all belonged to the Warrior.
And I remember hearing about Warrior coming back for years at that because he had been gone almost like 4 years, whatever it was at that point. There was a lot of rumors going on. Remember, they threw him in a magazine, like a fantasy matchup, him versus Bob Backlund. This is like in '94, so like there were like little things about Warrior. They actually, I remember on Superstars of Wrestling, they gave a short video. Is the Ultimate Warrior coming back? Find out next week. And then we didn't hear anything for months.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally they announced it. Remember Jerry Lawler was saying, oh, he gained a lot of weight. He lost his hair. Whatever.
He's in a wheelchair. He's 400 pounds.
Yeah. Oh, worth mentioning, there was always that Warrior died rumor. And that's why Hogan, in that promo was actually funny. Give Hogan a little bit of credit. When he did come back to WCW, he says, I thought you were dead. And that's like a little thing that us as wrestling fans knew because we heard this for years. But he came back, he squashed Triple H. It had to be done.
Yes. It at that point, you want to put him over big.
Yeah.
He's not there for 3.5, 4 years, whatever it is. You want to get him over quick, get him reestablished with the fans, maybe some new fans who don't really know who he is. Look at this guy coming out, the flashy colors, the hair, the tassels, the whole thing. And then to follow that up on Raw with, obviously we talked before about Goldust. It was the perfect segue to get him set up, back in '96.
Absolutely.
Definitely. All right. Number 5. Oh, I love this match. Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man, Macho King, Randy Savage, WrestleMania 7, the career-ending match, the match that we believe they should have main evented WrestleMania.
For the title.
Mm-hmm.
It should have been title versus career.
Yes, 100%. It should have. It would have blown the roof off the place because what we got, Hogan and Slaughter, it just stunk up the whole place. I don't care what anybody says. You had these two guys. You had this feud building since November, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Well, because remember, Warrior didn't. Macho Man wanted a title shot, right? And Warrior
he did. And Warrior wouldn't grant it to him. Right. And then at the Rumble, he sends Sherry out there to try to please with him. She kisses him and whatever and all that nonsense. This should have been for the title.
He hit him with a scepter, remember that? Blasted him, too.
Slaughter wins the damn title, and I'm like, what the hell are we doing here?
Damn. And then Hogan declares himself the number 1 contender.
Well, technically, he won the Royal Rumble, so,
Yeah, but at that point, that didn't mean anything.
Well, that's because Slaughter was the what would you call it? He was just like the go-to. He was the middle guy for the belt to go from Warrior to Hogan.
Right, transition.
The transitional champion.
Yeah.
But this match had everything.
Tremendous, tremendous. From the beginning, from Warrior walking out there, not running, and everybody's like, what's going on? Like, he's not running. It showed you, like, just how serious Warrior was about this match.
Definitely.
Yeah, he I have this vivid memory of him doing this in the match when the moves weren't working. He's talking to his hands, the voices, whatever.
He's looking
Is this
up.
my time? Should I
Yeah,
leave?
my
looking
destiny.
up. You know, it was such good storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
Such good
Oh,
storytelling. You know, and Savage and Warrior have been my favorites forever since I started. Since I was a fan, I was a fan before Warrior was in WWF at the time. And Savage was my favorite. Then when Warrior came along, I'm like, all right, Savage might be number 2 now. But they were my 2 favorite guys. I was so pumped to see them go at it. Because Warrior was the face and he was my top guy. I did want him to go over, but I didn't want Savage retiring. You know, so it was a lot of mixed feelings watching that match. But it was just so cool. And it was, again, amazing storytelling. And they both did an amazing job with that match.
Hands down.
And then after Warrior finally beats him, then you have the whole thing with Sherry, and then Elizabeth is in is at ringside. Because right before the match, you see Bobby Heenan is like, "Hey, isn't that Elizabeth over there?" How he could spot her halfway down the arena, I have no idea.
Right.
But
he's the brain, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But her coming in after the fact, and she's crying, and then those two reuniting was the great send-off for Savage after that match.
But how about Warrior kicking out of those elbow drops? And
there's like 5 of them too.
And he couldn't put Macho Man away, and then he uses the foot, which some people said it was disrespectful, but him and Macho Man had a conversation about that.
Yeah.
You know, he uses the foot and he goes like that, and he wins. Just great storytelling, just tremendous.
And
it was.
And that was in a time when you usually did not see guys kick out of one finisher.
Right, let alone.
Yeah, exactly.
He's hitting with elbow after elbow after elbow. And it was, you know, it was awesome. I mean, the whole thing, you know, from start to finish was great. My only problem is that it wasn't for the title as well, as you guys said before.
Yep.
Should have been the main event.
It should have closed out the show with the title, definitely.
Yep.
All right. At number 4, Warrior and Hogan meeting up in the Royal Rumble in 1990 after they both cleared the ring of all the trash.
Oh, dude,
they turn around and look at each other, and I'm like, oh shit.
I couldn't believe it, man. Because as a kid, I kind of like, you know, these are 2 baby faces. Back then, we didn't really see babyface versus babyface, but you always had it in the back of your mind, like, who would win, like Hogan or Warrior, like, because you knew Warrior was next up. And when they went toe to toe, man, I remember me and my brother were just going crazy, like, we couldn't believe it.
Yep. So my brother and I, we would like, you know, nobody moves, nobody moves, you know, it just, I mean, I know it. I memorized it. I've seen it 1,000 times, have no problem watching it again, just that part of the Rumble. And it was such an epic moment. And again, you didn't have babyface. So to have that moment play out like that at that time, you know, it happens now, not as big a deal. Happens then, it's unheard of. Yeah, so it was really
2 guys like that, yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, number 3, WrestleMania 8, probably one of the greatest returns in the history of wrestling, when the Ultimate Warrior returned to save Chump Hogan.
Yeah.
Now that we all know that whole match was botched because Papa Shango misses his cue. Harvey Whippleman, you know, gets involved, which is funny because Gorilla mentions that Hogan wins by disqualification because of Papa Shango, who's like 30 yards back. You know, Shango and Sid are just whooping on Hogan.
Remember, but Sid had to call the audible and kick out of the leg drop because Papa Shango was supposed to break it up, but like you said, he missed his cue.
Yep, and so he kicks out. Whippleman comes in. Hogan throws him on Sid. Now Shango finally gets into the ring.
They're stomping him out.
And then when Sid goes out to get the chair, we hear that music hit. And they're like, that's the Warrior's music.
Dude.
And you hear Heenan, it's the Ultimate Warrior.
Dude.
And it was, oh my God. And that's when we thought, is this the second Warrior? Because of that rumor back then. Because everybody thought he was dead.
Because of the way he looks, that gets
the short hair, he's skinnier.
But I remember this, man, vividly. I remember like where I was. I remember I was at my friend's house, packed house. Dude, we were screaming. Like, we just yelling. And I remember yelling. I was like, kick his ass, Warrior, kick his ass. I was just going bananas. We hadn't seen the Warrior, you know, since the previous year, and we didn't know what happened. At that point, I didn't know what the hell happened. I thought he just left. I had no idea. And
He
there
ran
was
back to parts unknown.
right, exactly.
exactly.
Then there was the rumors. I remember these rumors vividly. The thing about him being dead, I remember a friend of mine told me, oh, that he tied the tassels too tight, and that he had a heart attack, and the other one with the and he died. It cut off his circulation. Yeah, this guy
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard
cut off
that
his
one.
circulation. And then another friend said, oh, he was taking too many steroids, and then his heart exploded.
Yes, I
I heard
remember
that one too.
Right,
Heard that
right.
one too.
So we saw him come back. He comes back. He saves Hogan's ass, which in hindsight he shouldn't have. But
He should have been a
whatever.
3-on-1, but
But that saved the match for me. That saved the match right there.
it did.
You know that he
You know-
had the short hair. Go ahead.
You know, when you guys were in high school, you heard the same. We didn't go to the same high schools,
Right.
but I heard the same rumors, the same things, and it's so funny without the internet, without the dirt sheets, how we all heard. It's like those urban legends that happen,
Right.
I'll have cousins in Virginia and California, and then we meet up at a family thing, and like, oh, did you hear? I'm like, dude, I heard the same thing, but you're across the country. How did you know that? We didn't talk about it. And it's just
Right.
the same rumors. Warrior was dead. I remember even questioning for a minute, like, wait a minute, he is a lot smaller. His hair is a lot shorter. And I'm like, nah, that's him though. He's probably not using steroids now.
Right. Exactly.
But it's him. And then he started to get a little bigger then as he was.
And when you heard his
for a while.
voice, once you heard his voice cutting the promos, you
Yep.
knew it was
You
unmistakable.
knew it was him, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved when Sid hits him with the chair and he like stumbles for a second,
little
but then
bit.
he just keeps shaking
Starts shaking the ropes. Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping he didn't hurt Papa Shango because when he clotheslined him over, man, he
Oh
was
my
doing it like
God.
he's trying to take his head off.
He really
Woo!
he put everything into that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Too much adrenaline there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was great. That saved a mediocre match,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yep.
Because that shouldn't have main event in WrestleMania
No.
either.
No way.
But because if
It
you
was a double main event. Remember, it was a double main event.
No, it wasn't. The main event was an hour and a half back.
Yep.
Come on. Give Savage his credit. Give Savage and Flair. That was the main event.
Yeah.
All right, at number 2. Oh, I love this one. SummerSlam 1988. Honky Tonk Man is the Intercontinental Champion. Brutus the Barber Beefcake is injured. He cannot go. This poor guy. We've talked about this.
Bad luck.
Two separate IC title matches that he gets injured, can't participate in. So Honky's looking for an opponent. He's like, I'll fight anybody. And Gorilla's like, there's a lot of guys that'll take your head off. And then we hear the music, and Superstar Billy Graham's like, that's familiar music, brother. And out comes the Ultimate Warrior and squashes him in less than a minute.
Yeah, it just incredible. Like, I remember when it happened, I was like, I couldn't. I was so happy, but it was almost like I was just shocked.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah,
I think the ovation for that match was bigger than the main event.
Yeah.
Oh, without a doubt.
Oh yeah. That pop was huge. That was Madison Square Garden, right?
Yes.
Was MSG? Yeah, the pop was huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first two were at MSG, 88 and 89. And I remember him coming out, again, the huge pop and everything, and him just, shaking, going nuts, destroys Honky in 30, 40 seconds, whatever it was. And then, and then he goes back and he's got the strap on him finally. And it was just, as they say, they strapped the rockets to his back or the jetpack to his back. And you knew at that point when that moment happened, it was the stars for him, man. Yep. He was ready. At least in Vince's eyes, he was ready. And I wanted to ask you guys a quick question. Did Brutus, was he not in the match that year? It was a separate, it wasn't the parasailing thing when the thing hit him in the face.
A couple years later.
Right.
Yeah.
Didn't they do it on TV where Ron Bass cut him with the spurs, and that's how he went out, and that's how he couldn't. Okay, so I am remembering it correctly then.
That's what it was.
Yeah, it was Ron Bass that took him out. Yeah,
The outlaw Ron Bass. Yep. Okay.
Poor Brutus, man, because this is I believe two separate occasions he was to win the Intercontinental title. I know in 1990 it was for definite.
Yep.
But in '88, I really believe that he would have walked off with the title.
It was.
And you talk about you got the dumbest luck. I mean, it's unfortunate for him, but it was a catapult, like you said, for the Warrior, and he was taken off from here.
Yep.
And at number 1, we all know what this one is. WrestleMania 6, title for title, Hogan versus Warrior at the Sky Dome in Toronto. You couldn't get any louder from 67,000 people and a better match from these two guys. And the fact that Hogan, now I know Hogan had obligations during that summer, but the fact that he was willing to put Warrior over, I mean, that's just not something he would do.
Right, but Vince kind of, from what I understand, he Vince basically told him like, "Hey, you got to put this guy over. It's time."
Yeah, I mean, how because how long is it going to be that Hogan is
Yeah.
the top guy? There has to be somebody else,
The
and
build.
who better than the Warrior?
How about the build? Like we mentioned, the Rumble. It started at the Rumble into Saturday
Mm-hmm.
night's main events, into
Superstars of
superstars, and
wrestling, the
the
contract
promos, the
signing.
contracts, the promos back and forth. I mean, just
And
this is.
also the main event. They had one of those that year, and there was
Mhm.
another, head to head, and they did it so evenly too. It was so cool. It was
Champion.
like one week Warrior's coming out to save Hogan, the
Hmm.
next week Hogan's coming out to save Warrior, and they always wind up getting pissed at each other.
Yep. Champion versus champion too,
And
which
then
Yeah.
is
there was the one that Warrior gets involved, and then all of a sudden he just starts beating his chest and runs out,
hmm
and Jesse was like, "What's going on?" And he goes, "It's the mind games. It's the mind
hmm
games."
Mm-hmm.
Because even Hogan was like, "Wait a minute, I thought he was gonna we were gonna fight. What happened here?" He was getting into his head,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember WrestleMania 6. They were like, "He's running," and Ventura's like, "That's gonna be a mistake. He's facing the
Yeah.
challenge of his life." Nope,
You
that's
guys
just
know this,
vintage Warrior, and I'm gonna do what I gotta do,
but you guys
what
know
I
this.
normally do.
You guys know the story. How Vince wanted him to come out on the cart.
Yep.
That wouldn't have
And
worked.
Warrior said absolutely not. So Warrior's getting ready to run, and Vince says, "Warrior." He yells, "Warrior!" And then Warrior looks back at him and says, "Vince, I'm running to the ring." And then Vince says, "You heard him, boys. He's running." Warrior knew, man. He just the guy. He knew what the fans wanted. He knew what his character was. He knew how to get the most out of it. And then that match, it was split down the middle. Like people were going for
Yeah.
Warrior, people were going for Hogan. I was torn as a kid because I'm still a Hulkamaniac at the time. I love Warrior,
Yeah.
but I grew up on Hogan initially
Yeah,
Yep.
in the early '80s.
unfortunately, yeah.
You know, well, but
See, I mean, I grew up on Hogan as well, and I was always a Savage fan. Even when Savage was a heel against Steamboat, I was a Savage fan.
Love that
And
match.
but I was a Hogan man. Yeah, I was a Hogan fan too. And for me, it changed when I felt he did Savage wrong. Again, I'm a little older than you guys, so I don't know if it was just because of my age or whatever. But I remember being like, man, this isn't right. Again, I'm a kid, but I was like, this isn't right. Like Savage is in the right here. That's his wife. Like, what's going on? And all of a sudden I started getting a bad taste in my mouth about Hogan. Like he's putting a Liz on his shoulder. He's showboating. So by the time we got to Warrior Hogan, I was 100% Warrior. Some of my friends were still Hulkamaniacs and were torn. I was no doubt in my head. I was Warrior 1000%. This guy's got to win. He's got to go over. I mean, it's called the ultimate challenge. He can't not win the ultimate challenge.
Well, yeah, that should have been a giveaway. That should
Exactly.
as a kid, I didn't know. I was like, I did not know. I remember my uncle's mother said she said Warrior's gonna win this match, and then after Warrior won, she says, "I told you, I told
Yep.
you." Yeah,
I remember my jaw just dropped when Warrior got the 3 count. But the
Kick.
only thing I didn't like is you look back now. Hogan kicks out at the last second, even though the 3 count was
kicked out
dropped.
at the 4.
3.5. It was like 3.5, 4.
Like you
Also-
couldn't just lay down and have it. You had to do the kick out at the last second that it was too late.
Also, remember the referee was knocked out temporarily too earlier in the match.
Yeah.
They did it. Listen, I'm not that angry about it. Hogan's got to protect his character.
Of course.
And they got it. They're not done with Hogan. It's not like he's going away forever.
No.
Exactly.
And as a kid, my brother and I used to always mimic that. I kicked out before the 4, brother. I kicked out before. What are you doing? And to say again, stupid kid stuff, and I always wondered too, did Hogan walk to the ring and not take a cart? Because Warrior ran, I can't go on the cart, brother. Well, now I got to walk.
Yeah.
But he walked for 3 also, didn't he? WrestleMania 3, he also walked out to the ring. Yeah, so he probably was going to do that regardless.
Right. I would imagine Hogan, because he left in the cart, right? Hogan leaves in the cart.
He got back in the cart crying, telling I love you.
No, but listen, the ending was good because remember he tries to drop the leg. He tries to drop the leg. Warrior moves.
Yep.
And Warrior splashes him.
And you don't normally see that, by the way, him missing the leg drop.
No.
And then, but Hogan had to give him the belt. Hogan had to kind of stay in.
No, I like that. That was a
No,
sign
it was
of
good.
respect.
It worked. And then they hugged.
The torch.
Exactly. He's passing the torch.
But the cynic
I
in
thought
me.
he was going to wallop him with it at first. But,
Well, supposedly he was, according to Hogan. Years later, he said that's when I was going to become Triple H, Hollywood Hulk Hogan. But they didn't want me to turn heel. I don't believe that's.
Yeah. Okay, pal.
No, whatever, dude. That doesn't work for me, brother.
But it wasn't. It was a great passing of the torch. They hugged, and Warrior had both belts. That was
Such
awesome,
an
man.
iconic image. I
Yeah.
mean, I still have the cover. I have that Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the black and gold cover, and the Warrior, no face paint on, holding both. I mean, just such an iconic picture, such an iconic moment in the history of the industry.
Oh, yeah.
And it just makes me sad when all these stars now crap on him. And,
Right.
and especially now that the guy's passed, and then they still, oh, he was a one trick pony. He was a gimmick. He was just, dude, the guy was over. I mean, hugely over at the time. Helped sell out, at the time, 70 whatever thousand people in Toronto. And no Warrior, you don't have that main event. No Warrior, you don't have another guy at that moment in time that can get the strap from Hogan. Who else were you going to put it on at that point? Luger, Sting, they were in WCW. Flair was in WCW. You don't have another guy as big as Hogan at that point. So no matter what these people say about him now, is backstage, listen, I'm sure every guy's got their bad stories backstage, but Warrior was the right guy at the right place at the right time.
Right. And
absolutely.
Another thing about the Warrior, which they talk about how difficult he was. I feel like Warrior just didn't let Vince screw him over the way Vince was screwing over everybody else. So they labeled him as difficult,
Yeah.
But he was looking out.
They also act like that Warrior was the first one to ever do this. Remember, Roddy Piper didn't let Vince screw him over either.
Yep.
Right, that's true. And he didn't want to put Hogan over clean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's Warrior's not the first one to do this. He's protecting his integrity and his character, I agree with what he's doing.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that was either way, like Raz said, and we believe he was over, and that's all that matters, and he's remembered. Forget about he couldn't work and all this other stuff, and what kills me about people when they talk about his promos. As a kid, I loved his promos.
Same.
Because to me, I felt like I was reading a comic book. This is a comic book character that has come to life. And when he was talking about the stars and all this stuff, I felt this is his character.
Yeah, I would get lost in those moments. I'm telling you, man, even as a almost 49-year-old, I'll even go back and listen to them. And yeah, sometimes I laugh at them like, yeah, it is kind of silly, but I'm like, but that's still cool as hell. Yeah, and it's like, it worked. It was what was right for him. It wouldn't have made sense if he came out and it's like, I'm going to beat everybody out. Like, no, that wouldn't work. He had to be nuts, but he wasn't really nuts in real life. He was a smart guy. He was a smart guy, and he marched to the beat of his own drum. He just believed what he believed. And when it came to his character, and he admitted, he's like, look, I just made stuff up as I'm going, and I'm doing this and I'm saying whatever. It got him over, man. You can't deny the guy was over and over in a really big way at that time.
Yep.
From the moment he got there.
Yep.
From 1987 from till the time that he left. I mean, he was the guy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I remember seeing him on Superstars and Wrestling Challenge and stuff in late 87, mid to late 87, and seeing wow, who is this guy? This guy's interesting. I'm not used to a guy with face paint except Demolition, and I'm like, this is an interesting character. Who is this guy? And then seeing him fight Hercules at WrestleMania 4 and really just following him from that point. And then obviously SummerSlam, and then it just took off. But it was just such a cool ride, man. It was such a cool, I'm so glad I was alive to live through that and experience it. And the only thing I regret is just never meeting him. And I had two opportunities, and I'll kick myself for the rest of my life that I didn't take those opportunities to meet him. I'm like, well, next time. So, if there's ever another wrestler I want to meet and it's an opportunity, I'm meeting him. He's the one guy I wish that I had met. And unfortunately, I never did. But I know, Mike, you kind of met him.
I kind of met him, yeah. I was close enough.
Yeah.
That's more than the two of us.
I did smack his arm twice at different events that I went to. I was sitting on the, on the runway, and I smacked his shoulder or whatever. So yeah, I did that. Right. But I got a piece of Honky's guitar from one of the matches. And such great memories. And the Warrior, just his everything about him, his character. I just loved all of it. And he'll be forever missed. And I really want to thank you guys for having me come on to do this. It was an honor, definitely.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
No problem. Our pleasure for sure. All right, that's our episode. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. See you guys soon.
Take care.